And go. All right, we should be a go. I've got audio. Awesome. Okay, just like to always leave that mic open on the channels here just to make sure that you're getting my audio feed, and it appears that you are. So I'm going to go ahead and separate my windows now and pull up some chat windows here so that we can interact on this lovely, lovely Wednesday before Thanksgiving. I hope everybody's doing well today. I hope you had a wonderful Tuesday and that the world is treating you right. That's not always the case, but you know, we can be hopeful, right? Let's see. Okay, there's Facebook. Let me grab the YouTube. YouTube looks good. Well, you know, it's YouTube. Okay, so I've got my windows all open and we've got chat windows open. So if you all want to hop in and interact, say hi, tell me what's up in your world. Yeah, I think we're good. Awesome. Let's see. Currently 66 degrees in the shop. I actually had to break out the propane heater this morning, which is basically it's a big fan with it's like a torch. It's like a giant torch with a fan on it, and it hooks to a big, like a 20, what are those, 20-gallon propane tanks? The ones you use for your barbecue grills. And I have those. I have one of those that I bought last year, and I don't run it the entire time because it sounds like a wind tunnel. It's really loud, but it does help me to raise the ambient temperature of the room pretty quickly. I'm not going to say it's like super fast, but it was 50, like 49, 50-ish degrees in the shop this morning when I came out. It was cold last night outside. It was, I think when I went to bed, it was like 23 degrees outside. So it was chilly. And, you know, even though like my garage doors are insulated, it still gets cold in here because I have no heating or air conditioning ducting in from the house to moderate the temperatures in here. So it does get chilly. And even with, like I said, the doors are insulated, because it was funny, I was looking the other day, I was like, man, I should insulate my garage doors. And I came out here and looked, and they are insulated. So it's just cold. And when there's no active, you know, heating, no duct work or anything else in here, you know, sooner or later that cold is going to translate to the garage space. So I got the temperature up. I dragged in my propane tank from outside and fired that thing up this morning. I got it up to about 65, 66 degrees in here, which is quite comfortable for me. You can see I've got a sweatshirt on this morning, so I'm actually feeling a little warm in here. But yeah, it was one of those mornings where I definitely had to drag that out. So that was the coldest. I think that was the coldest night of the year so far, or of this season. And it's not supposed to be as cold tonight, and we're supposed to get up to mid-50s tomorrow, which is nice for the holiday. Have a little bit warmer weather. Not that I have anything planned or going on, but it's always nice. All right. So where are we? If you look at the titles of my of my live streams, this one is called Putting a Bow on It, because I'm trying to wrap up. I've got some Christmas presents here that I've made that I'm going to try to wrap up, or get close to wrapping up. Because honestly, you know, we're at November 24th. I need to get things packaged and in the mail. We're a month away, and the way that the mail works, you know, I respect USPS, but I know that they get inundated this time of year. So the stuff I need to mail, I want to get it finished and get it out there so that I'm not sweating you know, it's like, oh my God, is it going to get there in time or not? Get it out early. Don't deal with it. It's not that big a deal. So I'm going to try to get these things finished, and we'll go over these in a minute, because I did, whoa, now they're all falling. I did some work on them yesterday. I did a lot of work on them yesterday, actually, and very happy with the state that they're in right now, and we will go over those in just a minute. Also, I think where we left off the other day was that we were applying the Odie's oil finish to these bases right here. And this is one of the Sapelli, your mileage may vary. One of the Sapelli bases, and they turned out, they're quite beautiful. They are very lovely indeed. Let's see, let's get the old close cam here so you can see that these look really nice. Like this, I mean, it's got a beautiful chatoyance on there. This stuff, just the way when you move it, the grain structure changes and kind of shimmers and glows, and that's just the beauty of quarter sawn Sapelli. It's just a beautiful wood. But what I want to try to do with this stuff, because I did not take these to a super high sanded polish. With the Odie's oil, they say that the higher the grit that you use, the more sheen you get on your finished product. I took these to, what did I take these to? 320. Yeah, so I've got my 320 grit sandpaper here. I took these up to 320, which is a lot more than I normally do. Normally I go up to 220, but I took these to 320, and I'm not unhappy with them. I mean, they're buttery smooth. They feel so good in the hand. I mean, but I want to see if I can get a little bit more of a sheen on here, just a tiny bit more. Like, I don't want it to be glossy, but I want a little bit more shine on here. So I think in order to try and raise the level of shine on here just a little bit, I'm going to be applying a wax finish to it. No, it's not really finish. It's just a wax coat. This is Howard's Citrus Shield Premium Paste Wax. I've got this. I've also got some Johnson's paste wax. I think it's Johnson's. It may not be Johnson's. It may be, I don't know who it was. Anyway, I've got some other paste wax too. I've also got some, I've got 3 different types of wax. And I want to try at least the Howard's. The other stuff I have is, what do we got here? Let me just take a peek here. I've got some Minwax paste finishing wax, and I also have some Renaissance microcrystalline wax polish, which is in this tiny little jar right here. So this is the, come over here. This is the Renaissance wax, and it's pretty nice as well. I don't know how long that lasts. I put a coat of that, let me just wipe this off here because it's got dust all over it, but I did put a coat of that on this, which is my mallet, and it looks pretty good. I'm not gonna, it did raise the shine up a little bit on here. And you know, like I said, it's just a little bit of protection. You can see on the face here, there is a little bit of a shine on here, which is nice. I'm trying to turn it so you get that little shine on there. But anyway, you can see there's a little bit of shine on here, and that's kind of what I'm looking for. This is just walnut that was sanded and, you know, done. So if I can do nice things for a hammer, for a mallet, I think it can probably do nice things for these bases. So I figured I would try, maybe not the Renaissance at first. First of all, this stuff smells. It stinks. It's got I don't know what the smell is in here, but it kind of has a kind of like a petroleum-based smell to it. And I don't know exactly what the makeup of this is, and there's not a lot of information on the can that would tell you, but you can use this. Let me see here. Trying to peel off the sticker a little bit. Refined waxes blended to a formula used by the British Museum and restoration specialists internationally to revive and protect valuable furniture, leather, paintings, metals, marble, ivory, etc. Freshens colors, imparts soft sheen. So this gives a little bit of less of a sheen. I mean, obviously, if it says soft sheen, that's not going to be a high buffed finish appearance. So a little bit lower sheen maybe with this stuff, but it does offer a kind of a little bit more of a hardened finish. It's not a hard wax. It's probably a little bit harder than this stuff. Like I said, I've got the Minwax, which is just a regular furniture paste polish, which is kind of like a Johnson's polish wax. If I can figure out how to get this little thing inside here and open this stuff. I haven't opened this one in a while. So hopefully it is not dried out on me. There we go. Oh, woo, there we go. Very, very orangey smelling, which I like that. But it's kind of a semi-soft, polishy kind of thing. And so what I thought I would do is just put a coat of this on there. You can use a couple of coats if you want to. I like this because it really doesn't take long to set up. It's about 5 minutes. It's kind of like doing your car. You just basically get a small cloth, rub it into the surface. You kind of let that dry up or kind of powder up a little bit on the surface, you know, so you rub it with your finger and it kind of comes into a powder. And then you buff it off with a nice soft cloth, and that's all you do. So I figured I would do that. I'm just going to do the outside. I'm not going to do the insides or the bottom. I just want to do this outside area, maybe the top, you know, where it's the high vis areas of the base. So I want to try that. So we're going to set this aside for just a moment. We'll put some on there in a minute at a junction where it's kind of like, you know, it only takes like 5 minutes for the wax to set up. This is what's left of the epoxy that I poured for these little charcuterie boards the other day. This was out of the bottom of my little food container. I had like a yogurt, like a plastic yogurt container, and that's what I mixed my epoxy in. I obviously cleaned it out first, but I mixed the epoxy in there, and this is what was left in the bottom after it cured. So kind of interesting. So I didn't waste very much. There's just a little bit left in there. So I think I did a pretty good job of estimating about how much to mix. That to me is always the hard part. I mean, excuse me, there are formulas out there. Like if you're doing a river table or something like that, there are formulas that are available to help you figure out, you know, how wide it is, how deep it is, and how long it is. And then you can figure out the volume of the epoxy that you need to fill that space. I'm not doing that. I'm just filling little letters and stuff. So for me, it's a little more difficult to figure out how much to actually mix to fill these tiny little voids that I want to fill, and have them fill enough that it just goes over the top and allows me to sand them flush. So I did a pretty good job of estimating that, I think, because I had very little waste, and epoxy is not cheap. So I wanted to make sure that I did not waste any if necessary. Okay, let's talk about this bad boy. This is a walnut base that was finished, pretty much ready to go. In fact, it was to the point where I was ready to put some Odie's oil on it and make it all shiny and cool looking. But the problem was this had the logo carved in the front, and that logo was not carved deep enough. I don't know why it wasn't carved deep enough. It's the same one I've used. It's the same setup I've used and everything else. And maybe my bit didn't get set up right. But anyway, the carve was not deep enough into the surface so that as I was doing my final sanding and stuff, it was actually wearing away part of the carving. It just didn't look good, and it's like, you know what? I don't want somebody to pay for something that doesn't look good. And you can look at my other stuff. Like, you can go to my website and look at the other ones, and they look really nice and crisp and clean. And I wasn't going to put one out there that just didn't have that same crisp, line and everything else. So sad as it was, I went ahead and just cleaned off the surface. I ran this through my jointer a few times. This is just a little fill spot here that needs to be cleaned up. But I ran it through my jointer several times, and I actually had to do a little fill spot right there. But got the logo off, and now it just needs to be finish sanded. And I think, what did I sand to? Probably need to sand to about 120, 150, 220, 320. So we've got to run through the grits on this one and get it sanded up. And then this can get a little slathering of some Odie's oil, and then this can join its friends inside and be ready to go out the door. Like I said, some of these I'm going to put that wax on there. If the wax looks really nice, I may pull them all back and wax them. Otherwise, I'll just leave them as is. They turned out beautiful. I mean, they look fantastic, but they are a little flat. They're a little satin, if you will. And if I can just raise that sheen up just a degree, maybe with a little wax finish on there, I think that's what I might like to do. So I've got, pardon me. I've got this to finish. I've got to put a little wax on there. And then I need to do a little finishing on these, which are the charcuterie boards. So let's talk about these for a minute, because these look really nice. I just this morning brought out an old wet cotton towel. I had it soaked in water and wrung it out really well, but it was enough that I wanted to raise the grain on it. So these have been sanded to 320 grit. And turn my brightness down here. So these have been sanded to 320, which is, usually pretty soft and feels great. I wiped them down with a wet towel, and I did that for two reasons. One, I wanted to clean all the dust off from that 320 grit, because it does leave a really super fine dust on there. But the other reason was I wanted to raise the grain just a tiny bit. And I'm going to take these up in grit to, at least on the front, I may take these up to, like, what do I got over here? I've got 800, 1,000. So I might go up to 1,000 grit. I think I actually have higher, maybe 25 or maybe 2,000 grit. So I definitely have 400, 800, 1,000. I think I've got some 1,500. I want to see how far I can take one of these and just polishing it with these super fine. These are like wet dry papers. I'm not going to do it wet. I'll do it dry. But I want to try and get a really, really shiny surface on here and see how that interacts with the Odie's and see how much shine you actually get by going up to that level. But as far as the engraving goes on these, it turned out really nice. Now this is actually upside down. It looks like this. So let me get you a close-up so you can see how that epoxy inlay worked. So that looks really nice. You can see it's flat, just laid right in there. But yeah, so that turned out really well. And the other thing I did with all these was excuse me, I looked at my 1/8 inch roundover bit and I measured how big the bearing is on top. And then I went a little larger with a Forstner bit and put a hole in these things. And that way I could actually set this over top of that 1/8 inch roundover and just kind of go around in little circles and do a roundover on this circle here. That got done to all of them, so that looks really nice. Just like I said, just used a Forstner bit, drilled that out, put it on the router table, and just did a little roundover on the hole there, just to make it not sharp. And I've got some leather strapping, I don't know what you call them, like leather strings. It's kind of like what you would see on like a deck shoe or something, or maybe a pair of like leather house slippers where they're laced or whatever. It's that kind of leather strapping. And I'm just going to tie some little loops on here so that you can hang this if you want to. Just kind of a nice finished look. So that's my plan with these. Once I get the shine up here, I'm gonna, like I said, I'm gonna take these up to 400, and then we'll go to 800, 1000, maybe 1500, maybe 2000. We'll see. I have some others in my drawer over there. So, but I did go get some sand net. So this stuff is as fine of a sanding disc that I could find. Unfortunately, my Home Depot, you know, they don't cater to woodworkers necessarily. I mean, it's the home improvement store, right? So most people who go in and buy sandpaper don't need to sand beyond 400 grit. And so finding anything in a sanding disc that goes above 400 grit is pretty much impossible. In Home Depot, Lowe's, Ace Hardware, any of those places, they just don't carry the stock to do the fine sanding that I want to do. So I would either have to go back to Woodcraft and see if they had anything, which their sandpaper selection was a little sparse as well, or I'd have to go online and order it. And honestly, I don't have that time frame available to me. So I'm going to go ahead and do just the flat sanding with these after I finish with the 400 grit. This is the sand net from Diablo, which is basically just that netting type stuff. So it's a little see-through. You can see my hand through there or whatever. So it does have a net finish, which allows for dust extraction, which is really useful when you're doing really fine stuff, because that is the biggest thing. Is when you're sanding really fine stuff, the dust that you get in there can actually impede your paper from doing the job. So you need to sand a little bit and clean it off, and sand a little bit and clean it off, much more so than the lower grits. But that will also keep you from getting swirls in your finish. Now, when I'm doing the flat stuff, I haven't figured out exactly what I want to do. I may just use one of my sanding mice and kind of wrap it around and do it that way, because it does have a semi-soft but flat surface, because I don't want to damage it. I was using this thing right here, but weirdly, it has these 4 little, I don't know what these are, but these little nubs right here, and they actually like will impart scratches. So while this is perfectly set up for using these pieces, these 4 little nubs on here, I don't understand their purpose. It's got all these holes, and then like, if you look right here, you see those little nubs? There's one there, there's one right there, and then if you come to the other corner, there's one here, and there's one over here. And I don't understand their purpose, but they actually sit higher than the surface of the rest of the thing. It's hard to see here, but you can really feel it. And when you're sanding with something super fine like 800, you really, they just pop out. And so you just, I don't understand those. I might have to just like try to file those down or something. I don't understand what their little sole purpose is. But anyway, they're not really useful. I wish it was, because this has that kind of very firm rubber, and this is a nice flat surface. You would think this would be great, but those 4 little nubs make it not so great. And that kind of puts the kibosh on that. So anyway, oh, dusty, dusty, dusty. All right. I actually took a couple of minutes today, and I threw away a stack of sandpaper like this thick. That was just used sandpaper. And I just kind of, I get really bad. It's like, I don't want to throw sandpaper away. It's like, I can still use that. It's still got, but the reality is that I've come to the acceptance that, you know what, you have to use it and let it go, because it's no longer effective after, you know, a decent amount of use. That's why I'm going to these sand net ones, because they supposedly last, well, they say 10 times longer. I think that's a bunch of bull. I'm going to say maybe 4 to 5 times laster than a traditional paper-backed piece of sandpaper. So I'm going to give these a try. I have used them. I actually have one on here. There's a 220. They're pretty good. The only problem is they tend to get messed up on their edges. But we'll give it a try. I think Merca was the one who developed the net mesh stuff. They have an Abra net and their patent ran out. So there's a lot of people making these net stuff now. They were sitting back and waiting. And when that patent went, they're like, woo-hoo, and they jumped on. These are all my pads from doing the Odie's oil. And I'm just going to toss these. They were, once again, expendable. So yesterday, before we get moving, yesterday I went to my hardwood dealer and spent way too much money because that's what I do. But I needed wood for my cherry table, which is where I want to move on to after I finish these items. I want to move on to my cherry table and get that done. And I wanted some thick stock to use for the legs. I wanted some walnut that I can use for the legs. I kind of have an idea of how I want these legs to look, and I needed some stock to really kind of support the weight. It's a heavy table. I wanted 8-quarter. I wanted some 8-quarter walnut. They did not have any, sadly. The 8-quarter walnut is in the ovens right now. It's in the kilns being kiln dried, which is an awesome thing because if you're going to buy lumber, you really want your lumber to be kiln dried because that just brings everything to equilibrium and gets all the moisture, or a lot of the moisture, out of the wood and makes it really stable and much better to work with. But I wasn't there. I won't be there in a week. I was there now as of yesterday. And so I needed something, but they did have some 6-quarter. So I got a couple of, did I get 2? I got 2 really long 6-quarter boards. And one of them I'm going to use for the table legs on there. And that's more, I'm going to just reserve one for table legs. The other one I'm going to do some projects with. I have in my head this idea for a project for like a Christmas present or just something like that. But I was making these charcuterie boards and I was kind of blowing through some, I don't know, Pinterest pages and stuff, just idea, spawning some ideas and stuff. And I saw something that was like a serving tray. So about this size, right? So imagine something that's about this size. And then so my picture, this is that in the corners, it'll have little round recesses milled into it, which is nice to have a CNC. And then you have little cups. So one would go like here and one would go like here, right? Now I bought these yesterday. I kind of like them. My son says, why did you buy souffle cups? I'm like, because they were cool. These are just little stoneware. They're microwave and oven safe though. My thought is to put one at this corner maybe and one at this corner. And then in the middle, I want to have a ceramic tile in the middle. So this is a 4x4 ceramic tile. I was originally thought about doing something like this. This is actually an extra one from when my house was made. They left a bunch of these from like the bathroom or something. And it's very, I'm trying to get it to shine in the light here, but it's very glossy. There you go. There's a little gloss for it. But anyway, it's very glossy, and my idea is I want to get a bigger one. So I want something, this is too small. I want something bigger because this space, I don't know if you can see it better over here. So there you go. So if you imagine something about this size, this 4x4 is a little small because my thought is you can have like dips and stuff over here and maybe put some veggies and meats and stuff on this thing. But 4x4 is a little small. 6x6, however, might be a little bit more doable. I was hoping for 8x8. It's hard to find an 8x8. 6x6, I could do it like this and have a 6x6 on here. And then it's not going to be a plain ceramic. My idea is to be crafty. And I don't know if you've ever seen alcohol ink, but it is a really cool medium for, a lot of people use it for doing things in resins, in color stuff and resin and things like that. But you can also paint with it on ceramic tiles. and do these really, I'm not going to try to do anything really cool and pretty, or in terms of like, you know, a nice country scene or anything like that. But my thought was to do some abstract kind of stuff on here with some alcohol ink. And like I said, just go look it up. Look up alcohol ink on ceramic tile, and you'll see just a ton of examples of projects. And the stuff that you can do is really cool. It's super simple to do that. The only thing you have to do is there's a couple of steps after the fact to protect and preserve the artwork, if you will. So my thought is I want to order some ink, some alcohol inks, and they're really small bottles, but they're very potent. It's kind of like the stuff I use to stain my dyes and stuff. So very much like dye stain, only they're immersed in alcohol, so they actually dry quickly. Once they're applied, they dry kind of quickly, and you can reactivate them by dropping little bits of denatured alcohol on them. You can reactivate the colors in there. And if you don't like what you got on there, you can just take alcohol and a rag and wipe it, and it's perfectly clean. So in order to keep it from being cleaned off, you have to actually preserve it. There's like 3 different sprays that you would use over top of it. There's a, it's like a, I can't even remember what they call it now. I think I have it in my basket here. Hang on a second. I'll tell you what it's called. Where's my basket here? My basket. Go back. Here we go. In my cart. So there's one stuff called, oh, I don't have it on here. Camar. It's like a Camar finish is what it's called, which basically it has no solvents or alcohols in it, and you lay over 2 or 3 coats, and that actually protects the inks from being smeared or smudged by any other topical things that you put on there. It's made by Crystalline. I suppose I can get some here at a local Walmart, so I'm going to go look there. But then the other thing that you would put on there is, after that, then you put on some UV coating. It's a crystal clear UV coating that you put a couple of coats on that, and that keeps things, especially like the alcohols, not the alcohol, but the alcohol ink tends to fade or be affected by UV. And so in order to protect that, you can get a crystal clear UV protectant, which keeps the colors nice and vibrant. And because that's the other thing, is they look really cool and very vibrant. So you can keep them very protected from the UV and keep them nice and colorful. And so you put a couple of coats of that on, and then the last thing you do is you put on this stuff called a clear glaze. And so basically it'll have like 6 coats of top coat on there between all 3 of those to protect it. And yeah, so that would sit on there. I would have that. So as far as that goes, that's kind of part of the idea. But the other part is the board that it'll sit on. And my thought for that was to make either, and this is where I'm not 100% on this, it depends on how much time I want to spend. I could either make a long grain cutting board, because I also bought a 6/4 maple, and I also have some cherry. So I could do either 2 or 3 color variations with cherry and maple and walnut, or I could just do a walnut and maple variation. I've got the 6/4, which would come up to a fairly decent thickness board once they're planed and stuff. And depending on how I want to do it, or I could do an end grain. So end grain takes longer because you're basically doubling the amount of glue time it takes. You do your first pass where you get your strips of wood and glue them together. You glue the side grain together until you get a large board. Then once that is glued and flattened, because you have to flatten that, then you take it and you cut those into strips, and you flip those strips so the end grain is showing, and you can like flip them and alternate them and stuff and make them look cool. So, and then you have to flatten that once it's dried and sand the out of them and finish them. So I'm kind of like that pretty much doubles the length of time it takes to make these things, if not by 2/3 the amount of time. End grain just takes longer. because of the process, because it's harder to surface. You can't send them through the planer. Long grain, you can send it through the planer and clean them up zippity quick, which makes it nice. So I might just do some long grain boards, and since these are not going to be cutting boards, they'll be serving boards, that might actually be the way that I go with these, is just make some serving boards. I can, instead of putting handles on them, I can do a bevel on the edges, which is really simple. I can do that on the table saw, put a bevel on the edge to make it liftable. I could put feet underneath it if I want to. And then these little things will be able to be taken out or set into their little spots. So I would use the CNC to mill down an area, a thickness that would accept the ceramic tile and these, so they would sit in there and not shift around. And that was pretty cool. I could probably knock that out once I had these things done. And even this doesn't, as long as I have this one of these in hand, it doesn't have to be finished for me to move forward, because I'll have the size that it takes. These are not exactly, like this is a 4-inch, but I'm looking for my tape measure here. They're not exactly 4 inches. Where's my tape measure? Arg. Arg, he says. My tape measure's around here somewhere. Anyway, these are, you know what? We'll get exact here. This is supposed to be a 4-inch tile, but it is more like a, this is 4.3. So these are like 4 1/4 inches. And that is why, go it this way. It's easier this way. Actually almost 4, well, okay. Of course this thing doesn't go that direction. Why? You know, woodpecker, you're really smart, but why don't you make one of your scales run from this end down and the other scale run from this end down? Why don't they do that? They make all of their scales run from this edge up instead of reversing one scale on one side. Why do they do that? I don't understand. Anyway, yeah, these are almost 4 1/2 inches wide. I've got a line on some 6-inch ones, so I think I'm going to be doing that. You may or may not see that. Maybe Friday, if you pop in here on Friday, I might be working on that. These will not be like throw them in the mail type presents. These might be local presents or stuff that I can just throw in my shop and say, hey, you know, if you want these, here they are. But the big thing is I wanted to play with the art aspect of it and try to make some really cool designs and stuff on here. I've got these little kind of off-white, they're bone colored bowls, and I've got some blue ones. So we'll see what's going to come with that. But anyway, that was kind of my creative thought process. I kind of got inspired looking through Pinterest, which can happen. So that will be on my plate here soon. But I did buy that wood when I was out yesterday in the shop. I was thinking about that. I mainly went to get the walnut for the base, but I was like, oh, you know, if I did that, I could make some cutting boards and stuff, because I've got walnut here, but I don't want to use it because it's thinner stock. It's 4/4, and I want to use that for things like bases and stuff. And it's the 4/4 is too thin for using for the legs for what I have planned. So I bought those boards. I also bought, like I said, the maple board, which really just is going to be for doing these serving boards or cutting boards. I can make cutting boards too, so I can make a bunch of stuff out of it. I also, this was kind of a coup on my part, or not a coup, a deal. I got a good deal, sort of. I'll say it's a good deal. I also, while I was there, the guy who's there is just really nice, and I deal with him most of the time that I'm there. It's the same guy. I see him all the time when I'm there. But anyway, I was asking him about quarter sawn oak, white oak. And I was like, hey man, you got any quarter sawn white oak? You stashing any anywhere? Because they don't keep it on the regular lumber racks there. They kind of keep it off to the side. They've got a bunch of lumber racks, but they also have a whole bunch of wood stacked up in the back of the warehouse. And I'm like, you guys stashing any quarter sawn white oak anywhere? And he's like, well, yeah, we got a whole bunch over here. And they had really wide boards too, which you don't normally see in white oak. Normally the white oak boards are like 6 inches or less in width, and they had really wide boards. And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, oh, what are you getting for those? He's like, well, those wide boards, he said, that's $12 a board foot. I was like, holy crap, $12 a board foot. I mean, that's, to put it in context, 3 to 4 years ago, I was paying $6.50 a board foot for quarter sawn white oak, and it's basically almost doubled. And the thing is, now that was for the wide ones. I said, well, what are you getting for, I said, what do you consider wide? He's like, well, usually anything over 8 inches in width is going to be that price. So anything under that width is going to be, that's still, I think, like $8 a board foot, which is crazy expensive. But the thing is, cabinet makers and stuff, they really, they love this stuff because it just has this unique look to it. And I don't know, this is a board right here. I don't know if you can see it. I'm gonna try to turn it in the light so you can see what I'm talking about here, but you probably can't. Let me try close cam here and see if it gets a little bit better job. So there you go. So if you see all of these rays moving through here, all of this, see if I can get it tilted so you can see some of this stuff. All of this figure that you're seeing in here, all of this swirly stuff moving around, all of this is medullary rays that are present in quarter sawn white oak. They're in other woods too, and red oak has them, but I'm not a fan of the red oak because the red oak gets these really, really open grained vertical stripes in it that just do not look good. But this stuff, this is gorgeous. This has some just beautiful medullary rays in here. And I hadn't found any good stuff like this in a while. This board is a little wide. It was probably a little bit over the width, but he gave it to me for the under width price. So I got this board. I was super happy about it. It was a big board too. There's a lot of just the medullary rays in this. If you can see that, is just gorgeous stuff. And this stuff was cut really well too. Very straight, so I'm not gonna have a lot of loss, but yeah, I'm very excited about this. And this stuff looks fantastic. The reason I was really super excited about this is because when you're looking at old 1800s-ish cabinets and wood and stuff like that, what you see very often is quarter sawn white oak, and it has these marks on there, and it was very distinctive to that period of time. And a lot of the sewing machines of that era have quarter sawn white oak panels on them. Now, a lot of it's actually veneer because they found that they could make that quarter sawn white oak stretch. They could get more mileage out of their quarter sawn white oak if they veneered it. But even still, I mean, they're just beautiful and stuff. So in order for me to kind of maintain that antique aesthetic, I really, really like using quarter sawn white oak. But finding it is really tough. It gets used a lot for beautiful decorative cabinets and stuff. Cabinet makers eat this stuff up, and they know it, and that's why they can charge what they do, because they'll sell it in these huge batches. That's why he doesn't have it on his regular stock. He has cabinet makers and stuff who come in and ask specifically for this stuff, and he'll sell 100 boards to one guy. So for me to be able to find that and get it, because a lot of times I go in there and they're like, yeah, we don't have any. No, we don't have any. And it's sitting on the side because they're selling it and they want to sell it in bundles. But because I kind of go in there fairly regularly, they kind of hooked me up. And so I was really appreciative of that, because I don't buy a lot of it, but I did buy a very long board, about a 10-foot long board with that about 8.5 inches wide. And I'm going to see what I can yield out of that, but it's gorgeous wood. So I was super pumped about that. So yeah, spent about $200 at the wood store yesterday. I mean, all that comes back to me in the end, so not really a big deal. The oak, or not the oak, the walnut that I got for the legs, I'm hoping that table, once we start working on that table, that's not for personal consumption. That's going to be sold. and I'm hoping that I'll be able to pull about $700 out of that. I could probably charge more for it, but I'm not going to be greedy about it. I think about $700 is will be a fair price for it. So we're going to see, we're going to work on that. I have ideas about the legs and stuff. We still have to strip off the bark and get that clean and flat and sanded. I have to do bow ties in there. I'm still deciding whether I want to fill it with epoxy or not. We'll think on that a little bit. I think I might, because it has a couple of cracked voids in there that like I said, I want to put the bow ties in, but I also want to, I may want to fill those, because having cracks in your table and stuff, it's hard to clean those out all the way too. But anyway, that's a project for a future time, but that's what I did yesterday. A lot of sanding, a lot of other stuff, and kind of got to that point. What are we going to do? Let's go ahead and throw some wax before I get things dusty. Let's put some wax on this base and see if we can bring up the shine just a little bit. Like I said, I'm not looking to make this glossy shiny, but just a little bit of a sheen on here. Trying to figure out what I should use to, you know what, hang on. I've got some, let me see here. There's some little towel things over here. I might try some of these little applicator pads. Well, those are actually really thin. I don't know if I need these. Oh, hang on. I'm trying to find, these are non-abrasive wipes though. I want to use, pretty thin. Let me grab a couple of these. They're just really small squares. But I'm not doing a whole lot of space here either. I'm just doing a small area. So I'm going to grab some of these little non-abrasive wipes that you can't see me grabbing over here. And we'll come back over and see if we can, oh, God, my fingers were already dusty. It's like got dust on it. So, let's bring this over here and just see about putting a little bit, and I'm just going to make this into a little pad. That's all I'm doing. I'm making a little pad out of this. And we're going to set this aside, and I'm just going to get this covered in some wax. And we will see if we can't bring up a little bit more shine in here. Now, if I'm successful with this one, I pulled this one up because I just really love the way this sapelli looks. It's gorgeous and it looks great. So if I'm successful with this, I might bring out some of the other ones like the zebra. I have another sapelli inside, and but I figured I'd start with this small one because it's really manageable size-wise. Doesn't take up a lot of space. Odie's Oil does make their own wax. They make a couple of different waxes that you can do. But my thought was, you know, I'm already like $48 into that jar of Odie's Oil, which, you know, don't get me wrong, I understand. Finish is, you know, that kind of finish is not cheap. But I have to be careful putting things on this pad right here because it is dusty and it conveys the dust onto whatever I'm setting it on. So I'm going to go dustless here. But anyway, that Odie's can get expensive, and so I might try to pick up some of the wax at another time. They have stuff, they have a wax and they have a butter. So I might use the butter. But for right now, you know what I'm thinking? We'll give Howard's a chance here. See what they can do. And I'm just wiping this in. I'm not really buffing it per se. I just want to make sure that I get it really worked into the wood. And then we'll let this sit. Now I am going to, I'm going to do the top here. So I'll do the top just to see if I can get a little bit of shine on this. And these are the visual areas of the base, right? It's the side panels and the top. There's going to be a machine sitting inside here. So honestly, what the inside looks like, not as important. I mean, I do put finish in them and stuff because, you know, you don't want to leave any of your wood unfinished on one side. By the way, if you didn't know that, if you're ever finishing a table or anything like that, always make sure you finish both sides, because if you don't, you're going to get uneven movement of your wood. The wood's going to transport out of the unfinished side, or the water is going to transport out of the unfinished side and be sealed in on the finished side. And what will happen is you'll get warping and cracking and bad things. So make sure you finish both sides of your projects, or all sides of your projects if you can. Unless you, I mean, if it's plywood or whatever, it doesn't matter. But if you're using any sort of a solid wood and you made a tabletop or a shelf or something where you want it to look nice and you put a finish on it, put finish on both sides. And you should not wait, like, you should always finish the bottom first, then flip it over, put it on paint pyramids or whatever, just get that finish on there, and then take your time and do the top. But you're gonna seal that top and the bottom from moisture loss equally, and that way any movement will be very minimal. Okay. So this is done. I'm going to just set this little pad to the side here. And a little dirty. But put my top on. Boop. And we're going to set this to the side. What time is it? 11, we'll just call it 11:50. So about 11:55-ish or so. We will come back and take a look at that and see. I'm going to set it way over here to the side because I do not want it getting dusty dirty. From this next thing I'm going to do, what should I do next? Oh, pardon me, my nose is itchy, but you can't see me rubbing my nose. Thank goodness. All right, I'm going to bring my little pad back in here, and I'm going to see what I can do to these. I'm only going to do one of these. I have to do all of them, but I'm not going to bore you with all of them. But I do want to try one of these and see what it is going to look like. Let's see, what's this one? Let's do this one. Or do I like this one? I'm just looking at the colors and stuff in these to see about what I want to do. Actually, you know, I'm just going to use this one. This is fine. We're going to start with a 400, and I'm just going to use my little Ryobi sander here for this first one. So this one will get machine sanded at the 400 level, and I'll probably do both sides just because it's pretty quick. It doesn't take long. I'm going to take a pencil. I'm just going to draw out some lines, some scribbles on here, and that just lets me know that I have sanded all the areas, first of all, because I don't want to miss any area on here. But also, once that pencil line is gone, I know that I've probably sanded enough that I could move on if I wanted to. Let's see if I'm plugged in still. I think I am. Okay, I'm still plugged in. I still have the power connected. I still have the hose connected for the air, so we can vacuum up as best as possible. This doesn't have like a ton, but it does have, what's that, 2, 4, 6, 8. So it's got 8 holes on here. Hopefully it'll remove some of that dust out. But let's go ahead and just do this real quick. And start with a 400. And then, like I said, from there on up, we will do some hand sanding. And that'll be a little bit more quiet. Oh, shoot. My bad. I forgot I had a heater on back here. I cannot run all of these things with the heater on. It just said nay, nay. And it's going to take, there we go. Yeah, I popped my little fuse back there. I forgot I had my heater on behind me. So you can see that little box right there is a heater. And it was running. And it says, nope, can't do it all. So the other thing I want to do when I have that 400 is just hit that end grain, because you really want to try to get that end grain up. One thing I didn't mention when I was talking about what I did to these was I also did a 1/8 inch round over on all the edges just to kind of smooth them out just a hair. But now that we have done this, I'm going to go turn on my my fan over here, because it's my big dust collection fan, because we're going to make some messes here, and I need to keep a little dust out of the air. So I'm just going to put this on over here. Now, sometimes what I do is I stick it up on the table right here in front of where I'm sanding. I'm not going to do that today, but I do want to have it on, because as I move to these finer grits, you know what? I don't need these anymore either. As I move to these finer grits, I do want to make sure that I'm not leaving this stuff floating in the air. All right, now this is 800. So we just did 400. Feels really good. And I'm just going to take a towel here, a rag, and just wipe this down a little bit. The other thing that moving to these finer grits does is it puts a little bit more of a polish on that epoxy. Now, when I put an oil-based finish on here or whatever, that will shine up, but the finer the grit you use on here, the more that epoxy will be polished. How do I want to do this? I'm trying to think of how I want to do this. I have a couple of pads here that I could use, like little blocks that I could use, that I could wrap around this. Hang on a second. I think I have a sanding block in here that might work well for this. It's a thicker pad. It's kind of like it's a sanding sponge, but, which I'm not going to use the grit from the sanding sponge, but I can wrap it around the paper here and use the paper and still get that nice flat edge. And I think that's what I'm going to do with this stuff. Let me set this out of the way. All right. So we're going to go with a little 800 here. And I mean, this stuff, I mean, look how quick that stuff just fills up with grit and debris. And I mean, it doesn't take long to clog up your stuff. And that's why people do wet sanding, because the fluid from wet sanding helps to carry away and keep the paper from getting clogged, which is why you would wet sand. But I don't want to wet sand. I do want to do this. Now I can hear a bunch of grittiness under there. So what I can do is find my little brush that I've got. Where'd my brush go? There it is. So I've got a little stiff brush, and I can take this stiff brush right here, and I can just use that to clean off the paper and clean off any heavy debris off of here. I will probably have to use a separate sheet for each of these bases. The other thing that I can do is actively clean these. I can get my little brush here and attach this to my hose, and then we can vacuum off. So let's do that. So we're just trying to get all that dust that we created out of the wood. That looks pretty nice. Not bad. I'm going to hit the end grain a little bit here because, like I said, if you can get that end grain kind of polished up a little bit, it just looks a little nicer. And end grain takes so much work to get it up to a nice finish as opposed to the rest of your project. But I don't want to flatten any of these corners either, so I'm going to make sure that I'm hitting those as well. All right, and I said I wasn't going to do the back, but I think I'm going to. Pick up turkey dinner today. Yes, indeed. My dinner is ready. I ordered my dinner. Is that cheating? Probably, but do I care? I do not. Because that means I just have to heat stuff, not cook stuff. I'm okay with that. Because I'm having a small dinner, just a little bit of the family this year. I'm going to give this a little workout on the edges here. And we are going to get this side done. Like I said, the finer I go on this stuff, the better it should look. Do I need to do the edges? Why not? Just real quick. Just gonna give them a little once over here. I think this is maple and hickory on these edges. All right. So that's 800. And I'm gonna clean this off again. And then we'll move up to the next grit. The thing is, you don't want to leave any of this dust on there before you move to your next grit. You always want to clean things off. All right. Actually, this actually worked out pretty well. I mean, you can see, I mean, this paper is like trash now, but I do have a little bit on the edges here. So if I want to go back and refine around these corners and stuff, which actually I think I'm going to, I can use those fresh corners just to kind of really smooth these edges out. Some of them didn't get great roundovers on them. I mean, it's because you're going around end grain on some of these corners that it's hard to get them smooth sometimes. So we'll just kind of make sure that these get hit with this while we still have a good piece of paper right here. It's kind of some fresh paper on these edges. And let's try this end, which still has a little fresh paper on it. And then I'm just going to hit this end grain up here just to try to get it polished as best we can, because it's hard to get into these areas. We'll do what we can. Make it look good. All right. Okay. And I'm going to just wipe this off again Get my little dusty rag here and make sure this is clean, as clean as it'll be. And then we will, let's hop up to, let's see, that was 800. Let's go to 1,000. So I've got a sheet of 1,000 right here. And we'll do the same thing with this block. I'd like to wrap it this way. It would give me more surface to play with, but you can see that part of the block would stick out past the edges, and this is a coarser grit. So we'll just use the sponge this way. It's actually pretty good. It works out pretty well. It just allows me to hold it in place like this. All right, 1,000. We shall see if this gives me a higher shine than the other method of just going to 320 or 400. I tell you what, though, if you want to see how open grain walnut is, man, hit it with some 1,000 grit and you'll see, look at all of the sawdust. I don't know if you can see that, how the kind of gathers in these areas in the pores. It's kind of hard to see. It is smooth though. It's smooth as a baby bottom. All right. Actually, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean this brush off, but I'm going to have my hose here. So when I clean, I can brush it into the hose and kind of attract the dust that way instead of having it just float around the air. All right, and I'm just going to go ahead and do the back here before I clean it off. And also just going with the grain. That's the beauty of a long grain, is that you just go with the grain and it should be a perfect swirl-free finish. I mean, it is as smooth as glass right now, I can tell you that for certain. Let me hit this end grain down here. Make sure I get these edges clean. And I'm going to fold this over and just hand sand some of these edges with what's left of the clean paper. So I would like that end grain to be looking sweet and get these edges nice and rounded. So a little hand sanding. I don't like doing a lot of hand sanding. I would rather use a machine because I'm just, shall we say, lazy? No. I just don't like sanding. Most people don't. But it is a necessary evil here. All right, let me get this last little bit here. Make sure that this is smooth on both sides. And then we'll clean this off. See what we've got. So I'm going to vacuum it first, and then we'll come back and wipe it with a towel. I'm trying to get the bristles to kind of catch any of that dust that's in the pores there and kind of pull it out a little bit. shine wise, how are we doing shine wise here? Let's see if we can see. It's got a little bit of a sheen on there, right? You can see a little bit of a shine. So we've got a little bit of a reflective shine. I don't know if I can find it being shinier any one direction for you, but I mean, I'm just looking at it. I mean, it's not like a mirror finish on there or anything, but not bad. So that was 1,000. Let's see what else we have in the bag of tricks here. 1,000. That's 400. I think that's the finest I have pulled out here. So let me look inside of my, what is this? That's 400. Let me look in my box over here. Let's see what I've got. I think I've got some finer stuff than that. Yeah, I've got some 15 and I've got some 2,000. What do you think? It's a 1,500. And I'm going to pull a 2,000 out. Let's see if we got a 2,000 here somewhere. Where'd you go? I had a 2,000 sitting in here. There it is. All right. I haven't even opened this one. All right, so I've got 2,000. That's as high as I can go on this stuff. So I'll do a 1,500. So I've got the 1,500 here. There we go. Got a 15. I've got a 2,000. So we will do both of those. And I think that's where I will call it on this sanding effort. I don't think I have a 3,000. But honestly, that should be enough to get really shiny on here. And I'm getting really good coverage because you can see I've got dust all over this thing. So it's not like I'm getting pressure on just one area here. Okay. And I'm going to clean this off and go to the other side. Come on, get off of there. Let me just wipe this down. I mean, I do find that just brushing it off does clean some of that stuff out of there, exposes some of the fresh grit. And then, like I said, the big thing is we're going to see if it makes a difference. If it doesn't make a difference, I'm not going to do this for every single one because it just makes no sense. All right? I mean, why would I spend all my time sanding to a grit that really isn't making an impact on the final product? All right, I'm going to use the edges here to just clean up some of these ingrain spots. I'm hoping it makes a difference. Like I said, I don't normally sand to this level of grit. There are people who do, no doubt. Just gonna go ahead and rub these edges right here real quick. All right, this is 15. Clean off 15. We're gonna go to 2,000. Vacuum first, then we'll wipe it down. All right, get a quick wipe here. I mean, honestly, if I take my finger and rub some of the really, really super fine particulate off of the stuff, I mean, this is at 2000, this stuff's about a matte finish, maybe a satin finish on the epoxy. So, you know, not super duper shiny. You really, I mean, for epoxy though, you've got to go up to like, I have these pads for doing pins, and they go up to 20,000 grit. And that's when you're polishing, because like if I use a CA finish, which is basically like an epoxy finish on the lathe, and as it's spinning, you're using those pads to shine and polish that plastic, and you can go up to, like I can go up to 20,000 on that grit, and that's when you get the super shiny black, you know, that looks like a mirror. This though is very shiny now though. I'm looking at it. I mean, I've got a lot of shine on here, so not too bad. Well, you can see a little bit of it there. There's a little bit of, you can see some of the shine on the wood. Remember, this is no finish on here. This is just sanding. So there's no finish on here. That's just shine from the sanding. So it is super, I mean, like ice rink smooth. You couldn't get that with a Zamboni, I'm just saying. All right, I've got one last piece here. This is the 2000, and we are going to wrap it and rub it and then move on. Now, from here, I think the thing to do would be to, first of all, buff that piece over there that we put the wax on. Then we'll come and put some oil on here, because it has to sit for about an hour. Honestly, you want it to sit for about an hour. I'm going to work on this area down here just to see if I can get that nice polish here. Now, in reality, I'm kind of hoping it doesn't add anything to it because that would mean I wouldn't have to do anything on my end. On those other ones, I could just sand them to 400 and be done and move on. If it's significant, I'll be like, okay, I kind of am forcing myself to do it. I'm going through about a piece of sandpaper per grit, and I will not reuse these on another board. So they will just get this board, and then that's that. Because honestly, I think you've pretty much used the grit up at this point. So let me fold these up and get these end grain areas with the fresh paper. This side. Okay, these look pretty nice. Not gonna lie, they look good. Don't know why I'm singing, because it looks so good. Gonna give a little bit more on this. All right, clean it, wipe it, be done with it. All right, get my little dirty ass towel over here. Pardon my French. and give it a nice clean, nice rub down. And all right, so you can see as I shine this in the light here and look at the reflections, so you can see that this thing has quite the sheen on it. And it's not bad, not bad. Now, two things I can do. First, let me get this out of the way because, like I said, this kind of carries the dust, and I want to keep this dust free now. I'm going to, well, let's buff this off first. Let's buff off the wax and get that cleaned up first. Then we'll move on to this thing. Oops. All right. So I'm going to find a clean area of this little buffing towel. There we go. And we're just going to buff this off. Is that helping any? I don't know if that's helping or not. Sure. Not sure that this actually did a whole lot for me. The one thing I was looking at is maybe getting a buffing bonnet. I have a polisher that I could use, but I don't have any buffing bonnets. And so that might actually be beneficial to get a buffing bonnet. Possibly. Okay, I do actually have, now I say that, I'm going to do one more thing here because I want to try something. I'm just going to rub this wax off of here real quick. I actually do have something kind of cool that I want to try. I'm going to point my camera over here. I need to move a couple things around. Give me just a second here to move some stuff out of the way. Mainly, I've got this big sled that I use for flattening boards. I need to set that over here for the moment. Whoa. And hopefully I won't fall down doing so. All right. Let me fix my camera angle so you can see what I'm going to do over here. I've got a camera in the way. Actually, you know what? Let me take camera number 2 over here since it was actually in the way. But I can probably shine it right where we want to be. Okay, that works. So we'll go to camera 2. That is my lathe, and you'll notice on my lathe I actually have a polishing. I'm going to undo my fan for the moment. I have a polishing wheels on there because I polish metal and things like that on there sometimes, and pieces of sewing machines for my wife. And I'm going to move this out of the way, and this should be on. Let me see. There we go. Get the dust off of here. It's a little dusty. This is a polishing wheel. I am going to see if I use that polishing wheel on here, if that incurs or invokes, creates any sort of, I have a light here. Does that help? Doo-doo. There we go. See if that helps with the shine at all with that wax. Trying to look and compare. It definitely is a buffing wheel. I actually have some wax I could put on here. Let me buff up my. This is just like a very hard carnauba wax on here, and we can put a carnauba wax finish on here. Ooh, that's shinier. That's a little bit shinier. Let's do the long side. And I'm just going to run this through like this. Nothing exciting. and just kind of, I mean, this is made for like doing pins and stuff like that, for polishing. So, I mean, this is exactly what it's made for. Well, I won't say it's not made for doing large sewing machine bases, but it is made for polishing, and it looks pretty good. Now, is it like super shiny? No, it is not. But it does add a little bit of a sheen to it. And like I said, all I'm doing is buffing off that wax. And then I'm going to hit the ends here, these inside long pieces. And I think from there we can kind of evaluate where we're at. And what I'm going to do is grab, all right. So that is, I mean, it's so pretty. Look how pretty that is. It's just, that's just the most gorgeous wood. I love it. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this over to the side over here where we just were. And I'm going to come back over here. I just want to evaluate this in comparison, and I get dust on my hands, and I need to make sure that I'm not dusting these things up. But I want to see if that added any measure of shine to these. Stop being dusty. I need to handle them with like gloves. So give me a second, because I'm going to go inside and grab the other base that was made from Sapelli, and I just want to compare the shine and the sheen of these two items, one that's been waxed and one that, you know, had the oil and finish on it and then had wax, and then one that just has the finish on it. So that's this one right here. And what I'm looking at, kind of side by side these things. Okay, so truthfully, I see zero difference in the sheen. Like absolutely zero finish. Zero. That's kind of amazing that I don't see any change at all. I'm gonna take both these back inside. I see no change at all in that. And the feel is about the same. Yeah, it's kind of interesting to say the least. So one thing I might try is I have this zebra wood. And so what I'm thinking is maybe, now this one is, you can see it's got a little bit of a sheen to it. Look how gorgeous that is. But let's go over here, and without adding the wax to the, base and then letting it dry and stuff, let me just wax up my buffing wheel. And let's just do that and see if we can get a shine on here. And I've got little fuzzies on my wax here. Just putting a little wax on the wheel here. As it gets warm, it actually kind of melts that wax just a little bit and kind of adheres to the buffing wheel. And then I will do this side here and see what that looks like. I'm going to do this corners. I love the corners. And before I can, before I move on to something else, I can always look at it and see, because I've got a finished side or a buff side and a non-buff side, and it is just a little shinier over here. You spend a little bit more time here. Maybe. All right, well, you know what? Let's just do the whole thing here. And this might be something I do to them just before I get them ready to ship out. Those corners to be nice and shiny if possible. I think this is actually helping a little bit. I mean, not a ton, but a little bit. Just a little bit. It's just adding that little bit of, just a tiny bit of shine to this thing. All right. I can do the ends, or the long boards on the inside here. And that actually looks pretty good. I'm not going to lie. Of course, I could just be fooling myself and thinking that I want it to look better, so my mind says, yeah, it looks better. All right, what do you think? Does it look better? You think? Maybe? I mean, I am seeing some sheen and some shine on here. Like if you look at where the light's reflecting and stuff, back, like look at this corner right here where that light is reflecting off of those edges. It's not bad, right? It's not going to be glossy. There's just nothing about this that's glossy. It's all about, you know, getting a shine that is polished. That's all I want. I want a polished look to this, not a super duper shiny glossy finish. I just want a polished finish, like a nice furniture polish finish. So that's what we've got on this one. Ooh, that looks nice. Look at that. A little bit of a, there you go. Nothing spectacular, but did you see when I pull that across the light? Look at that. So as I come across that light there, I get that little glossy shine. So pretty nice. We're gonna go with that. That looks good. And this will photograph really well when I take this down to my studio. This is gonna be amazing looking. Just looks like I got fingerprints on these things though, because try to keep my fingers off of the sides here, because that wax is still probably just a tiny bit warm. And all right, I'm gonna set this inside. Just get it out of the way so it doesn't get dusty, dirty. All righty. And what I want to do is, while we're here, I'm just going to do a little Odie's oil on this board right here, and we are going to check it out. Now these other ones, I don't know, should I clean this first? I probably should clean this first, right? Because it does still have dust and debris on there. And the one thing you want to do is make sure when you are applying a finish, no matter what the finish is, whenever you're going to apply finish, you want to start with a clean, dust-free surface. So I'm just getting my my blue paper towel here, which is my normal way of doing things. We'll come back over here. And I have my naphtha. If you remember, the naphtha basically is a good way of cleaning stuff off. Ooh, look at that. That's going to look gorgeous. Look at that. I'll give you this view again. See? Look how nice it's going to look. Anyway, naphtha is a good way of cleaning the surface off and not having it sit on there for a super long time, which is what you get when you use mineral spirits. Mineral spirits just takes a long time. Although I'm not getting a lot of dust off of here, so pretty good. I think we did a good job with all that vacuuming and wiping. I just want to make sure that we've got everything cleaned out of all the pores and everything so that all we're getting on here is finish. Oh my God, this is going to look so good. That, I tell you what, the Brazilian cherry, along with the walnut, and I've got that's a regular, I think it's a regular cherry in between there. This has, on the inside here, on this side, this is hickory, maple, jatoba, cherry, walnut, and maple. So really nice combination. All right, I'm going to set this to dry. The nice thing, like I said, what I like about this stuff is that it flashes off pretty quickly and you can move forward with your life. Mineral spirits, I find you have to leave those for about a half an hour to get them to really do anything worthwhile. Well, my heater is still plugged in. Good. Okay. Yeah. So we'll let this finish. And once it's dry, we will put on some Odie's oil. Now, the thing is, you're probably not going to get to see the end result until like Friday, because I have to leave the Odie's oil on there for an hour to let it set up in order to really penetrate into all the wood fibers. That's the secret. You don't just wipe it on and wipe it off. Some of these hard wax kind of finishes, I'm going to say like Rubio Monocoat, and there's a couple of others where you basically are putting them on and taking them off almost one step right after the other. And that is something that they really they really emphasize with the Odies, is that you do not take it right off. You have to let it sit, and you have to let those oils penetrate into the wood fibers to really do their job. So it's a little different than some of the other finishes that you might have worked with, or that I've worked with. What's going on here? Pick up my turkey dinner. Thank you. I will be doing that soon. Anything else going on today? A new egg shuffle. Yeah, not that I can get anything out of that new egg shuffle. Thousands of deals for Black Friday. Whatever. Nobody's getting 3060 cards. Knock it off. Or 3070, or 3080, or 3080 Ti. These are video cards, if you didn't know. Nobody's getting those because they just are so hard to get. This is almost dry. I can hurry it along, but we'll just let it naturally do its thing. And then we'll put little Odies on there. The Odies is food safe. So we've got that going for it. Most finishes are food safe. I mean, there's some that label themselves as food safe finishes. Most are food safe because what happens is all of the solvents and things that are in there that make them not food safe, they cure out, they dissolve out and are gone, and you're just left with a hardened finish, like a varnish or something like that, is left in penetrated into the wood or on the surface, but it's at that point in time, it's not leaching anything back into your food if you put it on there. Most finishes are food safe once they have fully cured. Now, it may take 3 weeks to fully cure, but after that point in time, they would be food safe. This stuff, like, you know, within a day, you can serve on it and stuff. It is that food safe. I have salad bowl finish. Non-toxic when cured. I'm going to say it's non-toxic, even if you didn't say that. Although, here you go. You may, what? If you scrape, sand, or remove old paint. Oh, I don't know why they have a lead paint warning on this can. Why? It has no lead in it. So stupid. So this is a finish that a lot of people will use. This is salad bowl finish from General Finishes. This is used a lot if you do spoon carving, things like that. If you make bowls, if you turn bowls and things like that, and you're going to use them for actually putting salad in and things like that. I've used this in butcher blocks. I have actually made a mixture of this for cutting boards. If you go to the Wood Whisperer's YouTube page and do a search in his YouTube channel for cutting board finishes, he did a variation of like, he tried out like I want to say at least 4 different finishes for butcher, at least 3, if not 4 finishes for end grain cutting boards. And this was one of them where he mixed this with, what do you mix this with? He mixed this with something else. But maybe with an oil or something. Maybe he mixed it with mineral oil or something like that. But anyway, yeah, this is supposedly perfect finish for wood turning projects. It dries dust free, has a low odor, and just wipes on with a rag. Should maintenance be necessary, simply apply another coat anytime. So this is pretty simple finish to use. I mean, you can just wipe it on with a rag, wipe it off, and you're done. It's not very difficult to use. So that's why a lot of people like using it. It does have that benefit of being food safe, but I'm telling you now, you know, do some research, because I'm pretty sure like you could use Danish oil would be a food safe finish. But you can also use, people swear by, like they'll use walnut oil, and mineral oil is a very popular one. A lot of those need to be refinished though. Have I ever made a cigar humidor? No, I have not. I thought about it. There's a lot of, I won't say there's a lot. There's a couple of really good projects that I've looked at online in terms of YouTube projects where people have built them, where it's one of those things where you really, there's quite a few details in building a humidor that are different from building, like, you know, just any standard type, like any box like this. I mean, I guess I could turn this into a humidor, but you need to line it with a certain type of material to get it right, you know, because you're controlling humidity levels and things like that. On the other hand, I think there's a lot of opportunity to make some really cool looking boxes from, you know, for a humidor. So that might be down the line. I might try something like that. Ooh, that actually, yeah, my acrylic, my epoxy actually shined up pretty good. This was 2000 grit. 2000 grit. So Mondo 3030 is in the Twitch chat. He's the one who asked if I'd built a humidor. So welcome to the channel, by the way. Appreciate you being here. But I have not done a humidor. I've done a lot of like jewelry boxes and things like that for friends, family. I've done some commission work where I've built some special boxes to fit specific machines. I have a lady who does Civil War reenactments, and she had a very small portable sewing machine. It's a Civil War era sewing machine, and she wanted a case to take that around in where it sat on a little base, and she wanted something where she could just take it and put it inside this case and transport it to her Civil War reenactments. But she wanted something that looked kind of period correct, even though they didn't make cases for them. So I've done things like that. That was interesting. I used a lot of brass hardware and stuff in there. And it turned out pretty nice. I'm not gonna lie, it looked good, which it should. I charged her enough for it. Actually, I probably undercharged her for that because I really didn't know what to charge for something like that at the time. I can tell you now, I would charge probably about twice what I charged her because it was a lot of work. All right. I'm going to stir up my Odies here because it sat out here in the cold shop overnight, but it should be good to go now. Lovely. This stuff does have a very citrusy smell to it. It's a very citrusy smell. All right, and I'm going to use just my standard. These are the white kind of Scotch Brite. This is about like 4/0 right here. So it's pretty fine. There is a gray pad, a Merlon pad. I want to look into getting those. It's what the guy who demoed these, the owner of the company, used. It's like a Merlon pad, which is even more fine than these. So it's like a microfine pad. So I'd like to try and find something like that. I'm just going to spread this into the pad and get it worked in. And I find that works best. If you get it worked into the pad, and in that way it helps to spread the oil around more, because you've got a lot stored in the fibers. And then you can just put a tiny bit on your project and it goes a long way. So, oh, and the other thing I need is I've got a silicone pad, there we go. A little silicone just to keep it off of the dusty surface here. And we're going to work this in. It's really cool when you put it on like that black lettering. I mean, the lettering just starts to pop. It's amazing looking once you get any sort of like an oil finish on top of an epoxy that's been colored. It just really, I mean, look how that just like pops off now. It's just super standout kind of look to it. So that looks really nice. But I'm going to get this worked in, and then I have to, like I said, I have to let this sit. But it looks really nice. Colors are amazing. The walnut, the cherry. Actually got too much finish on here. All right, let me do the sides. And now, like they've said, and this is what we're going to test and see, that this is one of the few finishes that you can sand to a super fine grit and it will still be effective. A lot of them you stop at about 220 to 300, something like that. Because it won't penetrate, because you've basically burnished the edges of the grit, or the fibers of the project. But this supposedly doesn't care about that, and the more that you sand, the finer you sand, the better the sheen, the higher the sheen, I will say, not the better, but the higher the sheen of the finished project. So let me make this, I don't know how I'm going to get this in the little hole there. Got that little hole that I need to get this inside of. So I'm going to cut a little piece off of here. My scissors right here. I'm going to cut a little piece off of this and just get a little bit on this and put it inside and work it inside, because I don't want this to not have finish on the interior of my little circle there, because if it does happen to get wet, this is not a cutting board, it's a serving tray, but if it does get wet inside there, sticky. So here we go. We're going to just put this inside here like this, and we're just going to work this around and get finish inside so it will seal up, and it doesn't seal it, but interact with those wood fibers inside where that was cut. Yeah, that worked out surprisingly well. All right, let me just make sure I've got this really worked in. Just looking. Some of the wood you can tell is thirstier than other woods. And the wood fibers want to soak up that oil and stuff, so I'm just making sure that I get it really worked into the surface. And I can see from the walnut here why people like to use this for walnut tables and such, because it does really really nice things to that walnut. Just really makes it pop. All right, so what we've got here is hickory, maple, Brazilian cherry or jatoba, regular cherry, black walnut, and maple. And this is curly maple, so it has some figure in there. And I don't know if you can see the figure kind of dancing around the side. It's very shiny right now. But what we're going to do is we're going to set this off to the side and let it sit for an hour. And get it worked in up here. There's a little bit. And then I will come back and buff this off with a clean towel. But you need to make sure that you're buffing with a clean towel. All right, I'm going to set this aside. I actually have a little painter's pyramid thing over here that I can set this on. Like that. Now my hands are nice and gooey from the stuff. That's all right. It's probably good for them. My hands are nice and dry, so hopefully we're just going to think that it's good for my hands. And I'm going to clean off my little stick here. Close this up. All right. And then I'm going to close this up because I'm not going to do the others right now. I need to do, I'm going to wait for that to be buffed off, and I want to see how that looks. And I have all those bases that I just brought in. I had the bases that were just sitting here, and I can compare the sheen from that highly polished one to what I got off of those. If it looks exactly like the boxes that I have, which were sanded to 320, if it looks the same, why bother, right? Because that's just a waste of time. Nobody wants to do that much sanding. Speaking of sanding, that's kind of what I need to do now. Sadly, I have to sand. Can't get around it. It's got to be done. It shouldn't take me long though, but I need to get this last base. I need to get this thing moving so it can be in the same finished state as all the other ones. I think those other ones, I'm going to actually take them down to my basement and start photographing them. To put them on my website, because I have a store, links in the description, or in the in the description. There's a link in there. This one just needs to be sanded to final grits. My lid fits better one way than the other because when I flattened it, it was flattened with the thought that it would fit in one side. It's not perfectly level in there, so you always have to make sure that's flipped to the right side. All right, so if you're latecomer, I had a logo, I had the Singer logo carved into this. It wasn't deep enough. It didn't come out as well as I wanted, so I just cleaned this whole surface off, and now I'm going to sand the whole thing down to 320, 400 maybe, and then this is going to get the same treatment. It's going to get the Odie's oil on there, and it will join its friends on my website. But before I get to that point, I need to sand all this off. I'm just going to use my finishing sander. I am not at the 400 point here, so take this one off. Whew. And I need to get myself a fresh, let's see, I think a 150 is where I'm going to start with this because I think I left off at 120. So let me grab a 150, a 220, a 320, and hopefully, like I said, it should not take too long to do each of these individual grits because the finer you go, the faster the sanding goes. As long as you're, they say sand through your grits, which, by the way, let me throw this out there to anybody who's listening. When we talk about sanding through the grits, what exactly are the grits? I've been trying to figure this out, and there's not a lot of definitive information about what are the exact grits that you need to be sanding through. And what I mean by that is, what are the numbers? What, If it's really rough, I start with 60. But generally I start with 80. Then I go to 120. Then I go to 150. Now, some people go to 180 and then to 220 or 240. But do you need to go to 180? Is that sanding through? I mean, if I go to my Home Depot and look at their sanding things, it goes 80, 120, 150, 220. There's no 180 there. You have, but some places carry 180 grit. Is 180 necessary as a step between 150 and 220? I mean, how far can you go in your steps? You know, from 220, some people go up to 400. They don't go to 320. They'll go to 400. So if anybody knows of the definitive numbers for sanding through the grits, let me know. I'd appreciate it, because I just go with what I've got. I try not to, like, I don't go from 120 to 220. That to me is too big of a jump. I like the intermediate of 150, 220, and then, like I said, I've got a 320 and a 400. I mean, do I need to go to the 400 from the 220? Can I just jump right there? Or do I need to do the 320 and then the 400? Does 320 and 400 make that much of a difference? I don't have time to answer these questions. But if you know the answer or know where I can find it, I would appreciate it, because I would like to know. Because you always hear that, right? That's the big thing you always hear. All the experts, all the woodworkers, everybody says that. Make sure you sand through the grits. What are the grits? What are the appropriate grits? Who set the grit standards? Who came up with those numbers, doggone it? And why? So I have heard, like, you should never go more than double the previous grit. So if you're at 60, you shouldn't go to 120. You shouldn't be able to just double that. You should at least go to an intermediate step between. I would never go from 60 anything. I would always go to 80. 60 is way too firm. But like 80 to 180, you probably want to go with something in between. Well, no, 80. Well, yeah, because that'd be 160 would be doubling that, right? So you probably want to go something less than double, which would be 150 or 120 from 80. Generally, I'd take the smaller step and go 120. Anyway, it's one of those things, you know, everybody says it, but nobody really defines it. And I just think that's kind of funny, that we're really quick to throw out there, make sure you sand through the grits. And it is important to take your sanding up in incremental steps, because if you think about what you're doing, you're trying to eliminate scratch marks from the more coarse grit before that. And then you get more fine and more fine and more fine, so that each set of scratch marks you put into it are finer than the ones that were there before. And you're just constantly trying to remove those scratch marks out of there until you get a smooth enough surface that just looks like wood grain and not swirly scratch marks. But I'd love to know if there's a definition of what the grits are. I think sometimes it's wood dependent, and sometimes it's project dependent. Depends on what you're using that wood for. Depends on the method you're using to sand. If you're hand sanding and you're straight sanding with the grain, I think you can probably jump up a little faster than if you're using an oscillating sander, which creates swirls. They're faster, but I think you need to go through a finer steps using an oscillating sander than you would necessarily straight flat hand sanding. I need to like send a letter to the editor of Wood Magazine and say, you know, let's see some research on this, because I want to know. Probably other people want to know too. All right, you know what? I've got this marked up with a pencil. That's really, to me, that's one of the most important things, is use a pencil. Use something to put a line on your work. I could actually use my big thick pencil here, but put a line on your work so that as you're sanding, when that pencil mark is gone, you've probably hit and sanded far enough that you can move to the next one. The other thing is that pencil mark, especially if you do it squigglies and cover most of the wood surface, it lets you know that you've sanded the whole wood surface. Sometimes it's hard, especially when you get to the finer sandpapers, it's hard to know that you've hit an area. But if there's a pencil mark still left there, you know that you haven't sanded that area and you need to keep working. So I find that really helpful when I'm doing stuff. All right, I'm gonna do this real quick. Shouldn't take long. This is with the 150, and then we'll jump up and do a 220, a 320, maybe a 400. So I like to spend a little extra time on my corners because I have exposed end grain on these corners, the way that my joinery works. So I like to spend a little extra time on them just to get them smooth. They just feel better and they look better when they've got a really, really nice profiled smooth edge that you get from taking a little extra time to sand. And like I said, because it's end grain, you really got to pay attention to getting that sanded well so that it stays smooth. But I'm going to come back with my pencil now, and we are going to hit this again with the 220. And I mean, I think you can see my pencil mark on here. That's what I do. When I do a pencil mark, pardon me, it looks like that. So there's nothing, you know, fancy about it. I just make sure that I kind of scribble all over the surface. And it's, like I said, for me, it lets me know when I've probably sanded enough, and it lets me know that I've covered all the areas that needed to be covered. And actually, I'm gonna go ahead and hit this lid. I didn't hit this with the 150 because I'm pretty sure I've already done this with 150. But I'm gonna go back now, I'll do it with the 220. All right. Okay, that's 220. It's really smooth. I do need to clean this off now. It's very dusty. And you want to make sure you clean the dust off before you move to the next grit, just because you don't want any foreign materials or anything getting under your next sandpaper and creating scratches when you get to this point, because you've come this far. You want to try to keep it clean and dust free now. So I'm going to get my little brush here, and I'm just going to vacuum this off to start with. And one thing that really helps after you've cleaned it off is just to go back and re-inspect spots where you might need a little, like this one right here, I need a little extra work on this corner right here because I have a flat spot leading into that corner and I need to round that over just a little bit more. Like I said, to me, these are the areas where I notice things the most. And it's right around the joinery. The joinery is what I really like to inspect to make sure that I have super clean joints. And also square, like it's really easy when you're doing this, you see me working that back and forth. It's really easy to get things kind of cockeyed and then your joinery doesn't look right because you've sanded more on one edge than the other. So I really try to keep things square when I'm going around those rounded profiles. Most of these look really good. Like I said, I have one I'm going to hit just again, which is right. I'm going to find it now. But I did see it right here. So I'm going to hit this one again. I don't know if you can see it or not. I'm going to show it to you. But right in this profile right here, you can see that little line right there. You see that little straight line right there in front of my fingertip? It's really subtle, but the thing is, subtle things tend to show up a lot more when you put a finish on. So what looks subtle now can really pop out after you get an oil or something put on here. So I'm just going to do this one area really quickly here. And I think that will suffice for the 220. And then we can move to a finer grit. But it's really, like I said, it's important to clean your workpiece off and really inspect it when you get into those finer grits, because it's better to find out now that you've got an area that maybe needs more sanding or whatever than to discover it after you've put a layer of finish on there. And then you're like, now you got to take all that finish off and start all over again. I'm going to put some pencil mark on here just so that I can be back and forth across areas. So you can see where that pencil mark is on there on that corner. I don't know if you can see my pencil mark on there. There you go. So that pencil mark is indicative of the area that I want to work. And I'm just going to work this really slowly and kind of get that profile rounded and get rid of that flat spot right on that corner. I think that is probably good enough for what we were trying to achieve. Looks like I got all of that area cleaned off. I'm just going to hit it with the brush again and with the towel just to make sure, though. It seems to be much better now. Okay. That is very acceptable. So like I said, yeah, I'm gonna hit this with a 320. That'd be my next step. And possibly my finishing step. That could be as high as I go. I might take it to 400 because it really isn't going to be that much more effort to go to 400. I'm not going to go any higher than that. There's no sense in going any higher than that. 400 is indeed the highest I need to go. Once again, just drawing my lines out on here, just like I did last time. just to make sure I'm getting a thorough sanding of all the areas. I'm gonna do the same thing on here. The other thing is, it really helps you remember if you're spending a lot of time on something, you might forget to do the other side. And then when you go to do something with it, you're like, look, and there's pencil mark all over it. You're like, uh-oh. When you're working with a 4-sided box, I have done that where I've sanded 3 sides. I forgot to sand one of the short side because I'm always flipping the box over to get a good angle on there. And I come back and look and there's pencil mark. Like, oh, doggone it. But that's why it's there, because otherwise I wouldn't have known that I hadn't sanded that side, and it could have, you know, given me poor results for that corner of the, or that side of the base. All right, let's keep going. Almost done. Alrighty, that is to 320. You can see I've loaded up that paper pretty well here. It is pretty well used. Like I said, the only other thing we could do is maybe hit this with some 400. I have that net somewhere around here. Where did I put that? Right here. So I've got a 400 sand net that I could use on here. I would probably vacuum this out just to make sure I get all the dust out of it. But this feels pretty good. I'm going to vacuum everything off and make sure that it is pretty clean. But 320 used to be, I mean, that was pretty much my standard for all the time. It's pretty fine. I mean, everything feels buttery smooth at 320. I will guarantee you that. All right. All right, I'm just kind of debating on what if I should do that 400. I think I'm going to, because I've got it here, might as well use it. And then what I will do is when I get done, I'm just going to hit all these edges with maybe go back with this 320 pad and just hit all the corners and edges. I did roundovers, but they kind of get sharpened just a little bit. You lose a little bit of that roundover edge, and I just want to make sure that close. I want to make sure that I've got enough roundover on here that it feels really good, and I can do that by hand. So let's go ahead. I'm going to do the 400. I know I said I was done, but I'm not. Sue me. Just sue me. You know what I am going to do is I'm going to vacuum this out first. You can see through this stuff. It's a net. You can see through it. It's a hook and loop closure on here. And there we go. All right. Let's do one more quick one. I'm just going to put a little light pencil line on here just to, more as a visual reminder that I've done the side that I move along. All right. And do this too. The lid. You want the lid to be aesthetically the same look and feel as the sides. Right. I don't know why this feels rough on the inside. I have sanded this. Oh, you know what? I know why. Because I used a wet towel to wipe it all off and then I raised the grain. So I probably need to hand sand that to about 300 on the inside too. Oops. So you know what's better than sanding is sanding with the dust extractor actually connected. That's actually even better than just sanding alone. I'm going to just run this paper along the inside here because, like I said, I did hit this with a wet towel earlier, and it just rose. The grain was risen a little bit, and we just want to knock that down. And I'm just going to smooth these inside corners a little bit. So no extensive sanding here, just really. And if you raise the grain, it takes almost nothing to knock it back down again. 400 usually is plenty for taking the grain back down. But you will get a smoother finish, usually if you raise the grain at least once during your finishing process. Because what can happen is, even though you're not using well, if you're using a water finish, it could actually happen. But you know, the wood fibers are getting pressed down and pushed down or whatever, and when you get a little water in there, it just pops them back up, and you don't want that to happen at any point in time during your finish. So if you raise the grain, then you sand back over them, and it generally will not raise again. That's usually the only time you can raise the grain once. You usually don't have to do it. I've seen people raise the grain after 3 or 4 consecutive sandings of grits and stuff. I'm like, why? I've never had an issue where I needed to raise the grain more than one time. Unless you're working with some funky wood, I've never had that issue. So I'm not sure what that's all about, but typically one time, more than enough. I'm going to get that 320. Is that, I can't even see which one the 320 is now. I think it's this one. The 320's got a little bit more body to it, so I'm going to just work these corners a little bit and round them again. Like I said, just making sure I don't have any sharp edges. And that is pretty good. It just should feel smooth all around in your hands. At least that's the way I like mine to feel. Your mileage may vary. All right. That is that. That's disgusting. Very, very dusty, dirty. I'm actually going to clean this off with some naphtha now, and it's going to get really, this towel is going to get really dirty. because there is a lot of dust on here, but it's probably the best and fastest way to get this cleaned off. I'm also going to remove my little net from under there because that actually carries a lot of dust and puts it back on, and it doesn't look great. All right. But you know what does look great is walnut. When you hit it with something like that, looks great. And you can see all the dust and dirt I'm pulling off with my towel here. I will get this out as clean as I can with this towel, then I'll flip aside. Yeah, that's pretty dirty now. So I'm going to flip it, use the other side. Just get all this dust and dirt off of here. I'm not happy. I've got a little knot hole right here. It's flush, but it's just, I mean, it's filled, but it's just a teeny little knot hole in the middle of this thing. I hope that doesn't like detract from it too much. But there's nothing I can do about that. It's just a tiny little knot hole. It is what it is. It's wood, right? And wood has defects in it. It's not perfect. If you want a perfect piece of wood, you are in the wrong place, because I do not. That's a lot of money to spend for a perfect piece of wood. Perfectly clear. That ain't me. All right. Yep. Not bad. All right, let me get this top cleaned off here. Open this up. A little cleaner on the inside here. The ledge. Dust loves to accumulate on this little rabbit ledge right here where I put the lids. And then in the tops of the triangular supports. That's a very dusty place, and it's hard to get in those corners to clean that dust out, but it always looks better when you do. Almost done here cleaning this off. Bottom. And then once this is dry completely, it will be ready for its Odie's oil bath. And actually, my well, I'm going to take just a minute here before I finish up today, and I'm going to buff off that board that we did in Odie's, because it's been an hour, and we can see what that looks like. There we go. That's just pretty wood. I'm going to set this aside, let this dry, and I'm going to grab, I think I've got a clean piece of towel here. I'm going to cut me a smaller piece. I don't need the whole thing. And we're going to buff this off. Okay. Let me close my naphtha up because it will evaporate. All right. So real quickly, we're going to just buff off the oil that's on here, the oil and wax mixture that's on the surface. And we just use a clean cotton towel for this. And all we want to do is remove any lift, because if I go like this, I can still see a little smear. And we want to get that smear off of here. So it'll take a little bit to get all of this cleaned off. But you want to get it all off the surface. That's the key to getting a really good Odie's finish, is to get all of that stuff cleaned off. Oh man, it looks so shiny. Doggone it. I'm going to have to shine those. I'm going to have to sand those other ones to a much finer grit, I think, because this looks really nice. It looks pretty shiny. Not going to lie. It looks good. I think I've got all the oil off there. Nope, not yet. Got to keep it a little bit more oil on there. Keep cleaning it. Flipping the towel. because the key is you should be able to take your finger and take it down and not see any tracings of oil left. And I still see some. So we're not there yet. We're just going to keep going until this thing is completely buffed off and all that oil is removed from this side. That is the key to the good Odie's oil finish, is the buff. I think we're there now on this side. Let me get the sides here. Make sure that they're clean. A little bit. Oh man, that looks nice. So here's the front. I don't know if you can see how shiny that is. There you go. Trying to turn it so that you can see and get that sheen right there. That's really shiny. Wow, that looks really nice. So much shinier than the sewing machines. I'm going to say it right now. Much shinier. Not like glossy shiny, but definitely a semi-gloss finish on here. Definitely a semi-gloss finish, which I think might be preferable to these. I mean, but we went from what, 400 to 800 to 1,000 to 1,500 to 2,000. So there was a lot of progression on those grits to get to this point. Trying to get the sheen here so I can look and make sure it's pretty clean. Okay. Got the oil off of there. I got to get, I don't know how I'm going to get in here. Maybe my pinky, maybe? Make sure. I got to feed my cloth through here and get it inside so I can make sure that I got this oil free inside here. I can just spin it like this. Woo! Okay, that's just stupid, right? But I actually did get it off of there. Whew, man. And then let me get, the only place I haven't gotten is this end grain right here. Let me get that cleaned and buffed off. It feels good. It all feels dry, but it's so smooth, it's hard to tell. It almost feels like it's oily because it's so smooth. It's not oily. That end grain polished, wow, that end grain looks really nice. So let me get right up in these areas and get this stuff wiped off. All right. I'm a believer. That's a lot of sanding though. I really wish I had discs for sanding these things. Wonder if I could order some and have them here by like Friday. Because honestly, I would rather do that. And I think it's more efficient. And then just maybe use the 25 or the 2,000 by hand for the last step. Wow, that's spectacular. So check that out. That is a really nice finish on there. Just super glossy, shiny. Well, I won't say, I take that back. It's not super glossy, but it does have a really high sheen to it. And that is a finished board right there. I have to get a little piece of leather, tie it on the end here for a loop. And then this is done. Whew, I like it. I likes it a lot. All right. Man, I'm telling you, it feels oily almost because it's so smooth. Oh, why did it have to be so good? Why? Oh, well, it is good. Proof of concept. Sanding more makes it look more better. It's funny because it depends on the wood species too. The maple, as I'm looking, the maple does not pick up that level of shine, even though they're side by side. They had the exact same amount of sanding done to them. The maple does not pick up that level of shine that is on the other pieces of wood. I find that interesting. The these other pieces of wood, this is Jatoba, which Brazilian cherry, hickory, cherry, walnut. The walnut and the Jatoba by far are the shiniest. The walnut's pretty shiny too. It buffed up pretty nice. The maple, not so much. The cherry's okay. I think the cherry's all right. These right here just looks fantastic. Yeah, that's interesting that the maple did not get as buffy shiny as the rest of them. That's kind of curious. But anyway, that looks fantastic. I'm super thrilled with the way that came out. The lettering, although not glossy, is certainly standout to the point where you can see it. It definitely stands out. And there you go. You can see that lovely sheen. You can't see that lettering. That lettering just stands out and looks fantastic on here. So that turned out, excuse me, really well, and super pleased with that. And hopefully the recipients will be as well. Okay. Well, that definitely puts a bow on that one. Unfortunately, it means there's a lot of other bows I have to tie here. I'm going to take all of these up. Look at the difference between the two. There you go. So not finished, right here, finished. Just an amazing level of what finish can do, and a really nice finish can do to your project. It just makes wood come alive. And these look really cool and stuff, but they just flat and lifeless. And you get a really nice finish on these things, and they just look pretty much amazing. This is why I love woodworking. This is what makes woodworking like the thrill, and this is what makes all that sanding and stuff worth doing, is when you get a payoff like this. It's just, to me, it's just amazing. It's super cool. You can't really see it in person. The maple, this is figured maple, so it's showing some really pretty chatoyance and stuff in here. I didn't do anything. I didn't dye stain or anything, so it's just in its natural chatoyant state. And I don't know if you can see it or not. I don't know if you can see, but there you go. There's a little bit of that vibing going on right there. You can see it changes as I go in here, and it's just really pretty, and it's subtle, but you can see it as you move the board around, and it just looks amazing. All right, well, I've got a lot of work to do. I've got 5 more to do just like this, and like I said, I'm going to look and see if I can get some sanding pads and such to do it. I also have to, now that base is done, the walnut base, I've got to do the Odie's oil for that. I've got to do the additional sanding in the Odie's oil for these, and then everything gets buffed off, and then all of this stuff will be done. So I would imagine, hopefully by Friday, when we come back on Friday, all of this will be done. And I can start looking at my other projects that I'm going to be working on. I'm going to take a break from the bases. I'm going to move on to my, my cherry tabletop and work on that for a while. I just need a break from bases right now. I really do. And I've got some ideas for things I want to do later on, maybe some inlay and stuff, but I don't want to address it now because my brain's just like, and I've got the holidays coming up and everything else, and I just need something simple and straightforward that I can work on that doesn't require as many steps, but still gives me challenges and things to work on here in the shop. So, okay, I'm going to wrap it up now. You all have a wonderful, wonderful Thanksgiving, if that's something that you all do. You know what? We should all be thankful for waking up in the morning, if nothing else. So enjoy the fact that you woke up today and you could turn on YouTube and you could watch something. And other than that, come back and see me Friday. We'll jump in, see where I'm at here, maybe do something different. And yeah, just try to dive into that weekend. And until then, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, I'm here. Come see me. Leave comments, subscribe, follow, whatever you feel like doing. But come back and see me because I appreciate it. Take care of yourselves. I'll see you soon.